Hello folks, welcome to el canal de Chano Jose. Today we got a topic about sockets. And the sockets being in the mechanic industry, or they've been out there for many years, and there's different sizes, big ones, little ones, long ones, short ones for impact use, and there's all sorts of sizes, and there's different drives for 1 inch, 3/4 inch, 3/8, half inch. So they're out there. There's a variety of different sockets, but there's one thing that you got to pay attention when you're using a socket, and that if you don't choose the right socket for the job, you can make a headache for yourself. And with that, we're going to explain you something that you got to look out for when you're using a socket on a tough job or in one of your jobs. And with that said, let's get started. Okay, folks, so we have this drawing about the why 6 points and 12 points. Well, when you're working on an engine or some sort of a component that needs, and it's a tough job, and you're using a 12-point socket, in reality, you should be using a 6-point socket, because the nut or the bolt can be stripped by the 12-point socket. And it makes a difference when you're using a 12-point socket in a lighter job, when you shouldn't be using a 6-point socket. But when it's a tough job, you should be using a 6-point instead of the 12-point. So in the market, there's different sizes of sockets, but there's two differences. There's 6-point and 12-point. The difference between these is that the 12-point obviously has more corners, and the 6-point has only 6 points. So when you're using in a tough job, 6 points. Light jobs should be 12 points. And with that, we're going to show you the sockets and why we are explaining this. Hopefully it makes sense. So when you're getting into your jobs, and you can judge which socket should you use, even if they're the same size. If it's a half inch and half inch, which socket should you use when you're approaching a job? Okay, folks, on this side we have four 6-point sockets, and on this other side we have a 12-point socket as well. So we are exposing why they're different. As we can see, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 corners. So that's why they're called 6-point. So these sockets are recommended for heavy duty. When you are taking off a nut or a bolt that is really tight, you want to use a 6-point. So now we're talking about 12-point. So we're doing the bigger one. So as you can see, it has more corners. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 corners where the nut can fall in. These sockets have less spinning that you can do to get it back into the nut, if you can see. But the downside of this is that you can strip a nut or a bolt if they're really in there. So you can spin this on the head and strip it. So we're going to give you an example how these two sockets, 6-point and 12-point, can be good or bad on a bolt or a nut. Okay, folks, so we have the 6-point socket and a bolt for it, and a 12-point socket and a bolt for it. So we're going to start with a 6-point, and we're going to show you why we mean by this. We're going to invert the bolt, so you can see when it goes into the socket, it falls in almost flush, so there's less room for it, so it can spin inside the socket, so you won't be able to strip the bolt if you're taking it off. The downside of it is that when you are spinning the socket on a really tight spot, you gotta spin it more to get it back on it. Depends on the job. So that's the downside of it. So as you can see, you gotta spin the socket more to get it back on it. So that's the downside, but it has a really good grip to get it off. So that's the 6-point. So let's look at the 12-point socket. So here's a 12-point socket, and here's the bolt that goes to it. And this is a 916 and a 916 bolt. So we put it on, and as you can see, it still falls in, and you can spin it just barely, and you can get it back on again in case you can as you can see, you don't have to spin it that much. The downside of this is that if this bolt is really in there, you might be able to strip the head by spinning the socket over the bolt, so you might round out the head of the bolt. So with this socket, because it's almost a round socket for the bolt, so it's recommended to use a 12 point in a light duty job, so not on a hard or really tight bolts or nuts that are being in there for a long time, especially on bigger sizes. You want to be able to use the right socket for the job. 12 point, the downfall of it is that you might round out the bolt head or the nut if it's not coming off, because it might spin inside of the socket. But the good thing about it is that once you're doing a job, you can just barely spin it a little bit and it goes back on. The 6 point is the good thing about it is that when you're taking a bolt or a nut that has been in there for a long time and is really tight, you will have less chances of rounding off that head of the bolt or nut. But the downside of it is that if you're trying to spin the socket to get it back on, you have to spin it a lot more, and because it goes in more precise than the 12 point. And that's the reason why you use a 12 point for light duty jobs and a 6 point for a heavier duty jobs. So as we know, a regular nut, being a metric or standard, has 6 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the sockets, the recommended socket for it is a 6 point. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the 6 point socket is more recommended to take or put a nut that needs to be tight, really tight, or is really tight and you want to take it off. The 12 point is for light duty jobs, because they might spin on the nut. The 6 point is more shaped to the nut than the 12 point, and that's why the 6 point is more recommended heavy duty, light duty on the 12 point. And well, folks, we wanted to give you a basic explanation about sockets, even that there's different sizes, lengths, and for different drives. But the one thing that we wanted to explain is basic stuff on the 12 point and the 6 point, because that can make a difference when you're doing a tough job or a light job. And with that said, for those folks who are watching this video and haven't subscribed to our channel, please subscribe. If you like this video, give us thumbs up, share it, and we'll see you soon with more videos here en el canal El Chano Jose.